We're continuing with no other than Mr. Kevin Cole himself, and I've been very excited to have this chat with him. There's a lot to talk about, and I'm really happy that he's here. And just like before, if you have questions, along the talk, then feel free to raise your hands and we can speak, so no one forgets anything. Good to have you.
It is great being here. Appreciate the opportunity, and it's really a privilege to be able to share thoughts and feelings about music and KEXP, and to have all you here. So thank you all for showing up as well, and thanks to Peter and everybody on the HOTS crew for inviting me.
Yeah, great. So most of you, I guess, know you from KEXP, but just wanted to touch base a little bit on all the other things before that you did and defined how you came to work at KEXP and how you defined KEXP. So just to recap, you were a broadcast engineer. You have a degree in broadcast engineering, right?
I have more of an academic degree in broadcasting that I wrote for myself. So in high school, when I went to college, I was a hardcore music lover, and at those points in your life, you're kind of looking for how you fit into the world, and started working at the college radio station. Really loved that, and then just created this independent study degree. So it's more from an academic background and less of a technical background.
Okay, but you also refer yourself, at least on your Instagram, as DJ. So what about that? You were working as a DJ for a long time at the beginning, right?
Yes, I was a DJ in college radio, and then after I graduated, so I had this academic degree, this passion and interest for radio. I always loved radio when I was a kid, but in the States, it was all commercial radio stations with the exception of the college stations. And they were heavily formatted, so there didn't exist a place where I could go and play what I wanted to play. And I refused to just go to a radio station. It wasn't like a career, it was music that mattered to me. So at that point, I started working at a nightclub. So it was DJing in a nightclub, which was a great experience, to be able to share my love of music, all within the context, obviously, of a dance experience. But the club was, it evolved into First Avenue, which some people may know. First Avenue is actually still around. This was in Minneapolis. It's where Prince did the movie Purple Rain. So it was like a music lover's paradise. Like every band that was touring played there. And then on Friday, Saturdays, we would do kind of the dance nights. So I'd do dance nights on Friday, Saturday. That was a totally different thing. And it was a super eclectic format. We do disco, funk, rock. Part of what was cool about it is it was never connected to a trend. So it had longevity. But then I worked every night of the week. I worked 13 nights out of 14. I had every other Sunday off. So one night I might be doing sound for a brand new baby band, REM, for their first time in Minneapolis. The first 3 times U2 played there. Everybody played there, across genres as well. So it was a great musical education and a musical outlet. And at that time, it's hard to imagine this, but think of a time when The Cure was considered a weird band and you'd get beat up for liking The Cure. Or if you, like I did, dyed my hair orange or look like a goth, you in the early 80s, you couldn't, great music wasn't easy to find. And so First Avenue was the place we showcased it. And for me, I always felt like I was fighting for music. Like, what do I love? Also, I had a record store that sold mostly imports at that time. So,
and at this venue, this club, were you already trying to define the sound of the venue? And did you have freedom on deciding, what you put on and how you define the club nights and all?
Yeah, 100%. So At that point in time, I was hired to take over the club at the tail end of the, I like to think of it as the Saturday Night Fever disco era. Not so much the music, but the lifestyle. So that was depicted in that movie, and it wasn't something that I could relate to. So the manager of the club, a guy named Steve McClellan, knew that trend was fading, and kind of brought me in to help usher in a new era, but it was not defined. Nobody knew what it was, except that we knew we were going to do live music. We knew we were going to create a home for the local non-commercial bands across genres, like could be The Replacements, Husker Du, those kind of bands, really early alternative influences, or Prince in the time. But the idea was to have a super eclectic format, not attach ourselves to any one trend that then 6 months later would be irrelevant, and also to create an inclusive environment where people were welcome no matter, as long as people had an open mind. So across, sexual preferences and race, and if you had an open mind and were tolerant, we were going to bring you a mix of music. We wanted everybody to feel welcome.
In one of the interviews, when you were talking about how what's your work ethos as a DJ, and you were saying how when you try to break a new band, let's say, you'd find it really interesting, you would also play the influences around them, or the bands that were inspired that music, and you build this kind of like context or universe around even just a few new songs. And that sounded like such a great way, a great storytelling way to talk about music and your ethos about it. And
yeah, that was the approach. In terms of dance music, you're trying to keep people dancing, right? But my goal was always to introduce new music. So one trick would be a pretty obvious one, is to, if you've got a dance floor filled with something people know, then you mix into something brand new, and trust your gut that people are going to like it, and try and make that mix. But that kind of programming principle is one that we still use to this day, or it's a defining principle of KEXP. So we exist for people to experience music and to enrich lives, championing music and discovery with a heavy focus on new music. So we want to break new music, but we do that in a way by playing new music in the context of the music that we think inspired it or influenced it. And I say we think because I found out the hard way that you can't assume that the band actually thinks that. So Emma was talking about idols at one point, and we were broadcasting live from London in 2019 for the 40th anniversary of London Calling. And I just kind of assumed, we booked bands that we thought maybe were influenced or inspired or had that same energy as The Clash, right? So Idols seems like an obvious one. And then Joe was on my show and asked him, hey, tell me about the influence of The Clash, for Idols. And he was like, I wasn't even born when London Calling came out. And we never really heard it. I grew up knowing what it was and hearing it in the background, but it wasn't an influence. But it's an easy way on KEXP to play The Clash and introduce Idols, in that mix. Bands that we know, our listeners for the most part would love The Clash, and then will probably love Idols when they hear it alongside The Clash.
And just before we go to KEXP, just another milestone you had before that was, or many of them, but one was Amazon, and you worked on launching the music department and the music leg of Amazon. Maybe that's not something we know about a lot, but it would be interesting to hear how you went about working for this huge commercial company, which was probably working in a different way.
Yeah, so I might deviate a bit, so reel me in if I'm going off. But while I was at the nightclub, First Avenue, I was kind of waiting for radio to catch up and there to be an opportunity in radio. So I worked at a station doing just 3 specialty shows. And that was a commercial station. Like commercial stations, there's zero commitment to the format. They're going to switch formats if there's more money to be made doing something else. So for a brief period, for about 3 years, I was able to do these 3 specialty shows that I had total freedom, which was amazing. But the station sold. It turned into a young country format right around the time in Minneapolis the first Lollapalooza event happened, and Minneapolis happened to be the biggest market that year, in part because of this radio station. So there was a lot of interest, but they switched to a young country format. But the way that impacted me was a couple of us from the station put together a business plan, and I was able to be a part of a team that created a radio station from scratch. So that was like a dream come true for me. It was a really profound, amazing experience. And it's kind of in a way shares a lot of the same values as KEXP, but it was a commercial station. And after about 4 years, the owner sold it. And I took some time off to just kind of do some vision work and thinking about, like, what do I want my life to look like? And worked on this kind of personal mission statement, which I would highly recommend. Like, as adults, we never get the time, like a break in our lives, to just reevaluate where our lives are and what it is we want to do. And it was forced because the station was sold. But what I did is just sort of create this personal mission statement, and then I said I wasn't going to work for 6 months. And I took a job at one of the 2 last remaining cool radio stations in the U.S. And about 2 hours later, I got a cold call from Jennifer Cast, who was the general manager at Amazon. And at that time, I didn't know what Amazon was. I mean, nobody really knew. They were a bookstore with a really kind of rudimentary, like, sort of website. It was early web. But what happened was I eventually went to Amazon to help them launch the music sites. It was a second product line. So at that time, it was small. And for me, it was a really amazing learning experience. I knew at that time with niche formatting that the internet would play a role and that streaming would sometime be a thing. And I went to Amazon with the hope of being able to create multiple streams of audio based on genres. But there wasn't really streaming yet. Streaming really didn't become ubiquitous until 2002-ish, maybe. It was like a bad experience with a dial-up modem, if anybody remembers. It's horrible. Or you'd sit around waiting. But it was a great learning experience for me, but it was certainly an experience that was out of my comfort zone. I wasn't a tech person, but I got to learn a lot about technology being there. And at that point in time, I know Amazon's turned into something else.
Was Jeff Bezos an inspirational person in your life?
I didn't have that many interactions with them. At that point, there were about 300 employees, but I'd be in meetings. But it was just different then. He was super energetic and really driven. But my interactions were with Jennifer Cast, who was the most driven and passionate person. And this guy, David Richter, who was the marketing director. And at that point, what he said is, we're a discovery machine. We're going to help people discover their next new favorite band. Whether they buy it from us or not, doesn't matter. We're just going to help them discover it. And that, to me, was exciting, like that's what I want to do. But I always felt like I was there, or while I was there, I was just kind of a sponge, just assimilating what I could from all these pretty smart people and a lot of programmers.
Okay, so the next step was...
By the way, I was triggered by Emma. When you were talking about coding, I forgot that we had to write code. Editors and content producers had to write code to to launch an article, and it was a challenge.
So after Amazon, so you went to and started working at KEXP. And I was wondering if you could give us a little overview of the radio landscape, perhaps, and what's the context for KEXP in it at the beginning, because I think it's a bit different from what we know in Europe, like with all the terrestrial, the satellite, the commercial, the college radios. There's a lot of different elements, and just briefly, like, so we get a little bit of picture and understand where KEXP is in that landscape.
Sure. Are you talking about sort of perspective today in 2025, the landscape?
At that time, and perhaps after that, how it evolved. Yeah.
Okay. So at that time, KEXP was called KCMU, and it was part of the University of Washington and licensed to the, basically to the communications department. And we were very small, and for me, coming from Amazon, like I overlapped a couple of years, so I was just volunteering and doing a weekly show. But there became an opportunity for us to evolve the station. Basically, we got some funding that was kind of like a startup money for a station that had already been around for 30 years. So KCMU started in 1972, but the landscape was, it was pretty bleak then. You had commercial radio stations, which for music lovers, like everybody in the room here, it's not an interesting listen. And then if you're lucky in college, in certain markets, you might have college radio stations, which were great, but also very inconsistent. So the idea was to kind of evolve KCMU and really put programming principles in place that would create a certain amount of consistency that would allow us to build an audience. So that was one of the things that we did. One of my goals was to raise the visibility of the station within the kind of the music industry world, and I wanted it to become KEXP or KCMU at the time to become the kind of the most to become acknowledged as the most authentic or the most authoritative or like station that had editorial authority in the world of new music. So I wanted everybody to think of KCMU, as like the go-to place for new music.
Geographically, where could people listen to it? Just Seattle or?
No, so that's when we started streaming. So at that point in time, we were very low watt, almost a college station. We're still pretty low watt, actually. But I think we had maybe 10 or 100 watts, so we could cover just a small area. But we started streaming as well. So this was a key thing. And our mission statement at that time was to, as I said, enrich life, championing music and discovery, but also to explore the use of new technology as a means to have a meaningful experience with music. So through that work, we became the first station to stream with an uncompressed stream. This was all in partnership with the University of Washington. We developed things that are just kind of taken for granted now, like the 14-day streaming archive or on-demand listening. So we created a way for people to listen to any of our programming for up to 14 days. We created a real-time playlist. So, in pre-internet, you'd get a call on the phone, like, what are you playing? That's the question most people ask. So it was just an obvious, like, let's create a resource when you're listening, like, so the metadata is associated to the song and the stream, that kind of thing. So we did that, and then first station to do full song podcasting. We were early on in video, so that was always part of our DNA, to explore new technology as it was emerging.
What were your inspirations for these new ideas?
It was all driven by just creating community, building an audience. Let's build a global community of music lovers. that was it. Just create an inclusive audience, music lovers. I can't say it was like, and it was part of our mission, and our executive director at that time, Tamara, was working with the University of Washington, and we had this great opportunity to be kind of like a real-life lab to try some of these new technologies, but it was always a means of just getting the content out there. So I believe that we don't think of ourselves as a radio station internally at KEXP. It's easy to say we are, but we think of ourselves as a multi-platform means of getting music experiences out to people. And this kind of happened, we just had that focus, right? But after we launched video in 2007, within, I don't know, less than a year, some of the videos were sort of taking off in relatively small terms now. But for example, this Tallest Man on Earth video. Do you know him? Okay, great singer-songwriter. We did the video and suddenly it had 300,000 views, which today isn't a lot, but it was wow, that's amazing. And 2 weeks later, it was 400,000, 500,000, 600,000. It's boom, 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 boom. And it made us think wow, this video is getting way more traction or views than the audience we have listening to the station. So what does that mean? Who are we? So we redid our strategic plan and our mission, and we sat down and just started answering that question. And we really sort of came to this non-profit, sort of arts organization model, where we defined ourselves as, again, enriching lives, championing music and discovery, but becoming agnostic about the platform. So if people discover their next new favorite band on one of our shows, that's great. If they discover it in one of our podcasts, that's good. If they discover it, via the YouTube channel, that's amazing. Or if they even discover a new band via a social media post, we've done our job.
And by discovering, so at this point you were already sourcing and digging music all over the world and just trying to bring the best that you liked, or what was your programming idea?
Yeah, so there's kind of three fundamental differentiating factors for KEXP that I think are really important. One is we're listener powered. So we get the majority of our operating revenue from listeners. And twice a year we go on the air and we ask them for money. Public radio in the U.S. does not mean we're funded by the government. We get very little funding from the CPB. But that's the differentiating factor between the commercial stations. Commercial stations exist to drive the highest ratings and bring the biggest amount of money to their stakeholders. We answer to our listeners. So that's one of the things. Another is our programming principles, and the key programming principle is our DJs have the freedom and responsibility to curate their own shows. So everybody on air or on any of our platforms has that freedom to share the music that they love within the kind of guidelines of our programming principles. And that's what helps keep it as a brand, right? So we have these basic principles in place, but everybody, and one of those principles, for example, is to play new music in the context of the music that inspired it. Because we believe if there's not something people are somewhat familiar with every 20 minutes or so, there's sort of a fatigue that sets in the listening. And there's so much great music from the past that you can draw on, and a lot of new music, or a lot of music from the past, actually, some audience might not know.
Just one thing about your donation practices is that I looked at, there's a donation lounge on the website, and it says you can donate in a lot of ways. You can donate your vehicle, for example, which is quite surprising. And you can also donate stocks and and bonds. So you're really like also donation agnostic, I guess, if you're platform agnostic.
Yeah. I mean, the majority of the money comes from the fund drives. And are you familiar with like fund drives or how they do them? Like, have you heard them? They're pretty intense. So we've just embraced it. We're like, let's just have fun. Part of what KEXP's done is basically sort of broken most of the rules of radio. For example, we do a lot of live sessions. We've done up to 500 a year some years. We're kind of about 250 right now. But common practice within the music or the radio industry, which we don't care about, says you shouldn't have live bands on the air because it's a cume killer. Like, if you have a band on for 25 minutes, after 5 minutes, a lot of people are going to be gone. So we don't really care about that. We just think, who do we love? Let's play who we love. And champion those bands that we love.
And when you say that you listen to your audience, where do they come from? I guess from all over the world. But when you started to see it's growing, really, what were the big lifting points?
So initially it was in Seattle. Although when we started streaming, we put a big map up in the control room, and we'd stick a pin every time we got an email from someplace. And it's still amazing and incredibly exciting. But I remember at that time, this is probably 2003, getting an email from somebody who is listening kind of in Norway near the Arctic Circle. And I was on at like 3 p.m. I was just trying to envision, okay, it's like midnight or 1 a.m. What's their life like? And they're in, it's pitch black. They're listening. But another principle for us is we don't program for a demographic. We call it like a psychographic. So we're just trying to get music lovers, anybody who loves music, any age. We get our ratings and we know our numbers, and the average listener is maybe 36 right now, maybe 38. But if they're 70, great. If they're whatever, we just want people to have an open mind and want to hear new music, or an eclectic mix of music. We've got 19 specialty shows. So these are shows that dig deep into whatever. It's jazz, reggae, hip hop, punk rock, metal, ambient, neoclassical, Latin. A new show called Eastern Echoes. It's really about the Asian diaspora, blues, et cetera, and then about the other 75% of the shows are the variety mix, where it's like John, Cheryl, and I, whoever, trying to mix all those genres together. But so we're just looking for people who have an open mind about music. We do most of our marketing kind of word of mouth. For a long time, when the videos started taking off, we were like, we need to convert our video listeners or viewers to the stream. And that was kind of a big drive for a couple of years. And then we realized, some people just don't want to hear the stream. Or, they just live in the YouTube platform. Just like some people, we decided then that we need to shift our focus and try to meet people where they are instead of try to change people. So that's why when we think of, for example, social media, we do use it to promote, but we also try and do that by offering some kind of compelling bit of content that we think might pique somebody's interest to further explore that artist.
So these days a lot of people are on TikTok. Does it mean you're planning to, be more active there as well? Or you're, thinking of formats that are specifically fitting TikTok?
Yeah, so always. We're on TikTok, and we want to be on every platform where potential music lovers would be, but, we're also kind of scrappy. So as we go into a new platform, for example, we had an online presence for quite a while on the various social platforms. It was only a couple of years ago that we were able to hire a dedicated social media person and really have that person dig into best practices for those platforms and how can we be the most effective as possible, you know. So, yeah, that's key, tailoring the content on the platform for the people who are using that platform.
I was going to say several things actually, but just going back to all these different programs and just finding out for artists and people who would like to get on them, what would be the best way to try and approach you and pitch for either the radio or the YouTube channel? So do you have best practices for that, or that just happens by chance?
Both. So we've got a really great article on our website that's called Getting Airplay on KEXP. So I'd like to point people to that article. But as I mentioned, KEXP is really unique. All the DJs have the freedom to play whatever they want. We also have a music director. That music director is the kind of first line of reviewing the records that are coming in, mostly being kind of reactionary. So what's in the inbox? What are all the new releases that labels or promoters might have sent us? So Chris is that first filter. There is a rotation for the variety DJs. That is really mostly to get the records that we feel are the most important or the most exciting in the hands of our DJs as quickly as possible. Because we have 44 DJs. So the majority of them only do a 3-hour shift once a week. So any way we can help them with the process of listening to all the new music that comes out within a week or so they can better plan their shows. Got the 19 specialty shows. So I tell artists that they should make sure to read the article and follow that, but also get to know the DJs and make sure the DJs who you think would be open to the style of music that you play, make sure that they have that music. Because it's very common, this happens all the time. One of our DJs might get a MP3 that a new artist did in their basement that morning and just happen to send it to the DJ, and they happen to open it and hit play and go, wow, this is really good. I mean, that happens a fair amount too. Like all of our DJs are looking for new music and great new music that they're excited to share. I've said this to a bunch of folks before, but like I think we're all similar in this way, where when you hear something new that you love, that you like freak out about, the first thing you probably want to do is share it with somebody, like your best friend or whoever, and I think our DJs are like that. They're constantly looking for new music, and they want to share it as soon as they can, so their next show. I know, like for me being out here, I've heard a bunch of stuff. I might butcher a few names, but Macro Hang, New Fossils, Jazz Boys, Flows, I Am Yank, Palo Canto, Hakumba, guy at the record store gave me that record yesterday. I'm going to play all those Sunday on my show. I can't wait to get back and play those artists. And I think I'm kind of like all our DJs. They're just looking for new music, and they can't wait to share it with listeners.
Yeah. So with the status that KEXP has in the music lovers world, do you think about it in a way of responsibility that, you when you play a new song or you show a new artist, what kind of role do you play in their career or life, or how do you think about these things at all, or you just play what you think is great to play?
It's a combo of both. So we play, like all the DJs play what they feel, and the passion, but they're all developing relationships as well. That can't override the editorial decision-making. There needs to be a firewall. Emma was explaining this as well, between market and mission. So we don't like market to, like, we won't let market influence what we play. And it's, that's the same with relationships, and it can be tricky sometimes. Like, you love a band's first 2 albums, you might not love the third one. There's too much stuff to play. So, but we see our role as developing artists as well. So we want to support, we want to play them enough. If usually getting on the air is kind of the step to getting a session. So if we're supporting an artist and band and they happen to be coming to Seattle, that's an opportunity for kind of a next level of exposure and content creation.
And do bands go specifically for this to Seattle, or are they usually on tour?
So they do now. So our role has changed over the years, and it used to be we would be kind of handcuffed, or like, the bands that we'd be having on air were the ones that happened to be touring, right? And they were coming through Seattle. But we started to realize that we weren't fully doing our job in helping discover great new artists of merit, because there were a lot that couldn't come to Seattle for various reasons. If you're a new indie band in the U.S., you might not be able to tour, might not get out to Seattle. If you're on the East Coast, if you're an international artist, the visa process is really hard. So this changed our thinking. So we started out by going to music-centric events in the U.S. So it was CMJ, College Music Journal event in the 2000s, and then South by Southwest. And we would go to these places, and we'd take a crew, and we'd set up in a cool space, and we'd record maybe 20 sessions over 4 days. All artists that wouldn't be coming to Seattle at any point in the next year that we knew of. And then we started applying that model internationally. So it just made sense. As that was working, we started doing it with Iceland Airwaves, with their support. So for 10 years, we went to Reykjavik for Iceland Airwaves, and we would record sometimes in 5 days, 36 bands. Like, we'd hit the ground, just really, it's an opportunity for us. Let's make use of that time. Let's get some great content. And it was really successful. Like, so Iceland's population is about 330,000 people. And we've had over 100 million views of Icelandic content. And the Icelandic content for a long time was kind of indexing higher or outperforming just our content in general. So by that I meant like 7% of our videos were from Iceland, but 14% of our views. That was, a really hot period of time. And then we started branching out and going to other music-centric places. Next week we're going to be in Spain for BIMI, and we'll do the same thing. We were in Mexico City 3-4 months ago. So we're interested in developing relationships with music scenes around the world.
So are you open to these kind of invitations by organizations?
Yeah, 100%.
Whatever, yeah.
So for us, our reach is pretty big now, but we're still really actually pretty scrappy. So we got one team, and there's only so much they can do. So we tend to right now look at our remote broadcasts as an opportunity, like 2 or 3 times a year, to go to partner with somebody. And
in these cases, you bring some from your creative team or from your tech team, or you work with the locals?
It's primarily our team. So they want to control the aesthetic and the look and the vibe. So it's KXP production. But we usually have some folks on the ground who help out.
Yeah, but it's a big commitment. Anyway.
Yeah, it is. It's incredibly fruitful. It also means that if something's happening in Seattle, we don't have a team there to cover it, which, it's always a give and take.
Yeah. So you've been chief content officer and program editor or director, at KXP for a long time, and now you're shrinking your role a little bit, or you have been. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so I started on air in 1999, became the director of programming in 2002, and did that. Well, that evolved into, as the organization grew and got more sophisticated, we created like a C-level team. So that was a chief content officer, really overseeing the content on air, online, in person. And right around at the end of 2000 or 2020, sorry, I let that go, kept doing my show full time. I let the chief content officer go, but I still was in a role of senior programming advisor. Chris Kellogg is our chief content officer now. He's fantastic. Our team is amazing. And I've been sort of scaling back. I'm still full-time, but I'm on the air 1 day a week. And am working on special projects that I always wanted to do, but couldn't do because of my other responsibilities.
Okay.
Yeah.
And can you shed some light on some of these special projects?
Yeah, so they're about new shows and new, potentially new ways of delivering those shows to music lovers in those niche formats. So part of our, one of our principles is all good music deserves to be heard. Highly subjective. But when we ask ourselves, like, well, are we playing all good music? You know, there's a lot more music that we'd like to play and program, and there's only so much time in like a broadcast day, but we know there's been a shift to on-demand streaming and shows and show producing and podcasts. So the idea is one of them would be to showcase great music from around the world that isn't getting the support it should get. And, or from our perspective, right, isn't getting played in the U.S., isn't getting a lot of attention, maybe globally, or definitely not in the U.S.
And we had a little chat before that, and you said that you have some more time to work on formats that just brings across the values that you have in music and its role in society and in culture. And you said you have been working on and developing some really interesting formats around this.
Oh, like our Music Heal shows? Okay, KXP is so unusual. Again, it's in part because of the model, listener-powered, and then DJs having the curatorial freedom to play what they want, right? But you need to have finesse in doing that to build audience, and you need to, for us, we need to make an emotional connection with our listeners in order for them to support us, right? And there's a lot of options out there. People can listen to music via streaming, but nobody's going to give money to an algorithm. Or they might pay a service fee to use a commercial-free version of Spotify or YouTube, etc. But for us to be able to do our work, we need to connect emotionally. And one of the ways we've been doing that is we've kind of evolved into programming music discovery experiences, but shifting then, as we've seen the impact that music has in people's lives, to really addressing that, like the importance that music plays in people's lives. And it kind of started out sort of naturally, but in part, John, who does our morning show, his mom passed away. He did a really heartfelt show, very open on air, very vulnerable, just saying, man, my mom died, and here's the songs that remind me of her, etc., and programmed this beautiful show, and listeners really responded. They could relate to that. So he started doing an annual tribute to his mom. And a couple of years after, it became less about a tribute to his mom and more about everybody listening having a way to process grief. You know, when and we've all been there, right? So the role that music plays. We turn to music in almost every situation in our lives. So we kind of leaned into that and created a day, one of 4 days we do a year. We do one a quarter. This is Music Heals Death and Dying. So we ask our listeners, what's the role that music's played in your life in the process of grief or death or dying? And just got these really profound letters that we would read on air and play the songs. And it was really obvious to us that it was connecting in a way that was really profound. And it's kind of unheard of. Like, people will ask me within the music or the radio industry, like, what's part of the secret sauce of KEXP? And I'm like, describing what we do and saying this, like, hey, we have a day dedicated to death and dying. And they're like, out of here. Like, you know, and it's heavy. So we do one on death and dying. We do one on Music Heals Cancer, one on Music Heals Mental Health, dealing with issues of depression and related things.
That's super inspirational, and I think the way you approach music and how you talk about it, you know, how it's part of a big story is really, really. It comes across, I think, in all the things that you do.
Yeah, for us, it's all about passion and being driven by music, but really recognizing the power of music and the power of music to bring people together. And we need that more than ever right now in a divided world, politically, and you name an issue, there's a lot of division. So music is a means to bring people together. I think everybody here can't imagine a life without music. And music's essential, like air, water, fire, earth. So we see our role as, again, it sort of goes to the mission and the vision. So our vision is to harness the emotional power of music to bring communities together. So that's what we're trying to do. And we're trying to build community. We're trying to build a very inclusive community of people that love music. Doesn't matter what age you are, just an inclusive. We deal with these issues on air, sort of gender equality, racial equity, sexual preferences. We're trying to be relevant and create meaningful experiences, and music is all about feeling and all about great art is about those issues.
And going to the future, how do you feel about this mission? Is it gonna be harder or easier or more challenging? What do you see ahead of you?
That's a great question. So if you're talking about the future of radio, like in the 2000s, we were told radio is dead by every consultant. And this is the era of digital, right? And also the era of, let's see, ubiquitous streaming about 2003. I think the iPhone came to be in 2017, YouTube, or 2007. YouTube 2005. So look at that 5-year period of time and then move forward 5 years. It's a completely different world. TikTok launched in 2017. So what's that, 7 years ago? AI is really, like if you look ahead, the one thing that's critical for radio and maybe every platform or any platform is to be open to change and innovate. And if you aren't where your audience is, you need to get there. So one good example might be, and you asked earlier, what was the motivation to do certain things? The motivation for us to do video was we had a terrestrial channel, but we also knew with streaming, a lot of people were listening online. They got a screen of some type, whether it's their desktop or laptop or phone. And there would be an expectation, I thought, like people are going to expect to see something on that. So if you're hearing a live performance on KEXP, you're going to want to see it. So that was sort of part of the idea around video. And if people want to listen to music on a phone, like this was a issue or a challenge for us in like 2006 or 7 or whatever, they want to listen to music on the phone. You could be the greatest radio station in the world, but if you aren't providing your programming in the way people want to listen to it, you're dead, So we needed to be able to deliver our programming via a mobile app.
And now that you mentioned AI, are you thinking of ways to incorporate AI in this user flow? I don't know, they want to chat with it or something?
No, kind of have a similar take on this. We call ourselves robot-free radio sometimes. And we, again, because, we wanted to position ourselves against streaming and algorithmic, I don't even want to say curation choices. So we want humans to pick our music, or that's the approach we're taking. And I personally want to hear music selected by humans with all its flaws and imperfections and mistakes. And I think that makes us more relatable as well. Our DJs, or I, fuck up on air all the time. And when you hear that, I think listeners can relate to that versus like a super slick auto presentation where it's perfect and passionless and stiff and.
Yeah.
So I don't want to downplay it either. We don't know. 5 years from now, the world's going to be radically different. And the key is that we all need to be open to change, be willing to change, be willing to explore, and be able to understand where our listeners are going to be. For us, mission-based organization, it's maybe easier in some ways. We just need to go, how are people discovering new music? Where's their passion? How are they doing it? And either be on the front of those innovations, which we've been in the past, or sometimes we've been behind, but seeing that we need to change. So we all need to evolve and be open to change.
Do you guys have any questions, girls?
That's a great question. Is guitar music getting is it not happening or is accepted as much? Not for us. So there's obviously a pretty big mainstream trend for hip hop. There's an underground hip hop scene that we embrace. About 2 years ago, somebody told me to go to my local record store, Easy Street, and it's in West Seattle. West Seattle is where Soundgarden, Pearl Jam, Mudhoney all grew up, and this store is like the place where everybody would go. And just said, hey, go see this band, Princess Pulpit. And I had never heard of them, so I went, and it was all high school students, and it was guitar-based. They sounded kind of like Television, if you know Television, or Talking Heads, very angular guitar rock. And the place was packed, like a couple hundred people there, free show, and it was all high school kids. And for me, it was like a real revelation of like, okay, kids are picking up guitars again. And that's good. Like I like that, and I want to see that. But love all styles of music. And I guess my not really advice, I guess, but I would just say you just got to keep persevering and doing what you love and doing it, you know, from the heart, and hopefully people acknowledge that, and just like stick to that, and play music because that is what you need to do, and hopefully people will like it. And by hopefully, I mean not because it's good or bad, but, you know, some of those trends get in the way of what people are interested in at any given point in time. I see the pendulum swinging all the time in terms of trends, but for KEXP, we're just trying to play as eclectic mix of music and styles and sounds. And in Seattle in particular, and I kind of think this is happening all over too, because I think of bands that I've been liking lately, like Mourn, a band, South London based, but they're from Wales, really young kids, and it's guitar rock, and it's great, you know, and it's like Sprints or Mail or the new Eves, or in Seattle there's Deep Sea Diver, which is kind of very much how you described your project. So, yeah, I think guitar-based music will, I think it's on the upswing and will always be around in some way, shape, or form. Did that answer your question? Okay.
Thanks. Anyone else? Now's the time.
Yeah, so that's because commercial radio in the U.S. is very heavily formatted, and it's designed to deliver a very specific demographic that can be sold. So, and this is how they talk about it, which is sad. They'll be like, okay, we need a format that will attract 44 to 56-year-old males so we can sell them beer. Classic rock. So they're not driven to introduce new music. They're not driven to take any chances. K-Rock might be more of a 80s-based oldie station. The classic rock stations are going to play your Led Zeppelin's type thing. There aren't many stations that play an eclectic mix. There's a handful of what we call non-coms in the U.S. that are kind of like KEXP, but each one's a little bit different in terms of their sound. But good luck.
Okay. Anyone else?
Yeah, community's been really important to us locally. We have a station in San Francisco now as well. So we try and do events in those communities. So we have a presence. And but we also are trying to build community globally, which, we have to do without a physical presence per se. But just do that in part through engagement and hopefully creating a place where listeners can engage as well. So, for example, when we were in Iceland and we were streaming live, we were doing live video streaming. And the first time we were doing it, just watching the comments, it was people listening from all over the world, but they were engaging with each other in real time. So like, hey, Mexico City in the house, Buenos Aires in the house, and they started communicating with each other. And that helped create a sense of community. When we're on air and we reference people, like on our Music Heals days or during the pandemic, for example, I would ask listeners where they were listening from and read their statement about what it's like in that part of the world. And that helped make people feel less alone and people feel like they were part of a community, even though they might not physically be in Seattle or where we were. So I think there's ways to do it online, and there's obvious ways to do it in person as well. So KEXP has we had an opportunity to build a new facility in 2016. So we created a public space that's open every day. It's got a coffee shop, it's got a little record store, an art gallery, all of the in-studios for the most part that happen, people can attend, and we curate events that happen in that space. So that has been a way to create a real tangible sense of community. So I would say through events, but also kind of engagement online, you can do it. And it's been key for us, super important.
I think our time is up. So if there's any last questions, don't be afraid to bring it on. No. Otherwise, it was super interesting. Thanks very much. I mean, hearing how you can articulate the vision and the mission, and keep it in focus and work around that. That's really amazing to see this dedication. And I guess we all see that it's working out pretty well. So thanks very much for sharing these stories and your experience with us.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks very much for the questions and for being here.
Yeah, thank you for being here, and best wishes on all your musical endeavors moving forward.
Yeah, thanks. See you guys next time.